Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe and support me. The air was thick with the scent of Pandora's dense jungle, the leaves vibrant with life, rustling gently as if whispering to one another. Tara stood still, the warmth of the soil seeping through her bare feet, grounding her to the earth. She gazed up at the towering tree of souls, its bioluminescent tendrils glowing faintly in the dimming light. To her people, this tree was more than a sacred monument. It was the heart of their connection to HFY, the all-encompassing spirit of Pandora. But today, that connection felt fragile, on the brink of being severed forever. In the distance, she heard the low hum of human machines. The sound was a constant reminder that the balance of Pandora was no longer in Navi hands alone. Since their arrival, the humans had burrowed deep into the land, laying down research stations, drilling machines, and data-gathering drones. Tara had once thought that by working with them, she could ensure that both her people and the humans could share this world in harmony. She had believed that understanding their science would help protect Pandora. But now, after the latest catastrophe, she wasn't so sure. "Do you feel it?" Loken's voice came from behind her, deep and filled with resentment. The young warrior had approached her quietly, his presence as fierce as the storm that brewed in his heart. Tara turned to face him, his blue skin and piercing amber eyes nearly blending into the forest around them. He was taller than her, broad-shouldered and carrying the weight of their people's anger on his back. "I feel it," Tara said softly. She didn't need to ask what he meant. Every Navi could feel the growing unease in the air, as if the land itself was crying out for relief from the humans' interference. The recent accident and explosion near the Tree of Souls had shaken everyone. Though the humans claimed it was an accident, Loken and his followers saw it as a declaration of war. "Yet, you still stand with them," Loken spat, stepping closer, his voice low but seething. "You work in their labs, watch them tear apart our world, and do nothing." Tara's heart clenched. It wasn't as simple as Loken believed. "I'm trying to find a way to stop this without bloodshed. If we attack them, if we start a war, the humans will retaliate, and they have the technology to destroy us. All of us." Loken's nostrils flared, his gaze hardening. "We can't let them continue. The humans only take, never giving back. They desecrate our home with their machines, their experiments. We must act, or we'll lose everything." Tara wanted to argue, to plead with him to see reason, but she knew it was futile. Loken had already made up his mind, and his anger was shared by many of their people. They were ready for rebellion. The young Navi leader believed that only force would make the humans leave, and every day more joined his cause. "I've seen what they're planning," Loken said, his voice lowering to a conspiratorial whisper. "Their new energy system will drain the life from this world, starting with the Tree of Souls. You know this, Tara. You've seen their machines." Her stomach twisted. She had seen them. The humans' energy project was more dangerous than they let on. While the official reports claimed the research was meant to find clean energy solutions for both humans and Navi, Tara knew that the corporation funding the project had darker intentions. They sought to extract Pandora's energy for their own gain, with little regard for the consequences to the planet's delicate ecosystem. "You could help us," Loken urged, his tone softening, trying to appeal to her one last time. "With your knowledge, we could stop them. Together, we could protect our home." Tara closed her eyes, the weight of his words pressing down on her. She was Navi, but she had spent so much time among the humans, working in their labs, learning their ways. She believed in peaceful solutions, but with each passing day, it seemed that peace was slipping further from reach. "I can't," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Not like this." Loken's expression darkened. He stepped back, his jaw set in determination. "Then you've chosen your side." Without another word, he turned and disappeared into the dense foliage, leaving Tara alone with her thoughts. She stood there for a long time, staring at the Tree of Souls, wondering if she had made the right choice. Back at the human research facility, Tara felt the cold sterility of the lab settle over her like a suffocating blanket. The sharp hum of machines and the sterile scent of disinfectant replaced the rich, earthy smells of Pandora's forests. She walked through the brightly lit corridors, her blue skin and traditional navy clothing stark against the white walls and metallic surfaces. Dr. Carter, the head of the research project, was waiting for her in the control room. He was a tall, thin man with graying hair and an intense gaze that seemed permanently fixed in deep contemplation. He looked up from his data screen as she entered, a brief smile flashing across his face. "Tara, glad you're here," he said, standing up and motioning her to sit. "We've made some progress on the energy system. I think we're close to a breakthrough." Tara forced a smile, sitting down opposite him. She had once admired Dr. Carter's dedication to science, but now, knowing what she did about the real purpose of the energy project, she found it hard to share his enthusiasm. "That's good to hear," she said, her voice steady. "But there's still concern among the Na'vi. The accident near the Tree of Souls has caused a lot of unrest. People are scared, and some of them are talking about taking drastic measures." Dr. Carter's expression darkened slightly, and he sighed. "I understand their concerns, but I assure you, the accident was just that, an accident. We're doing everything we can to prevent any further damage to Pandora's ecosystem." Tara's fist clenched in her lap, her nails digging into her palms. She wanted to believe him, but the more she learned, the more she realized that the humans' plans went far beyond simple scientific research. They were after something much more dangerous, something that could destroy her world. "I hope you're right," Tara said quietly. "Because if you're not, there will be consequences. The Na'vi won't stand by and watch their home be destroyed." Dr. Carter leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "I hope it doesn't come to that. We're here to help, Tara, not to destroy." "You've been working with us for years, so you know that better than anyone." Did she? Tara wasn't so sure anymore. She had spent so much time trying to mediate between the two sides, hoping to find a solution that would benefit both the Na'vi and the humans. But now, it felt like she was standing on the edge of a precipice, with no clear path forward. "I just want to make sure we don't cross a line we can't come back from," Tara said softly, her gaze dropping to the floor. Dr. Carter nodded, though there was a hint of impatience in his eyes. "We won't." "Trust me." Trust, that was the word that hung in the air between them, fragile and uncertain. Tara stood up, unable to stay any longer. "I'll see you tomorrow." As she left the lab, her mind raced. Logan's words echoed in her head. He wasn't wrong. If the humans activated their energy system, the damage could be catastrophic. But starting a war wasn't the answer either. There had to be another way. She just needed to find it. That night, Tara couldn't sleep. She lay in her hammock, listening to the sounds of the jungle outside her window. The leaves rustled in the breeze, the distant calls of creatures echoed through the trees, and the soft glow of the bioluminescent plants illuminated her room. But all she could think about was the ticking clock. Time was running out. Logan's followers were growing more restless by the day, and the humans were pushing forward with their project. Just as she was about to drift into a restless sleep, there was a soft knock on her door. She sat up, heart racing, and opened it to find Ethan, a human engineer she had grown close to over the years. He was one of the few humans who seemed to truly respect the Na'vi and their way of life. "Ethan," she whispered, stepping aside to let him in. "What are you doing here?" He looked around nervously before stepping inside and closing the door. "I had to talk to you. I overheard something today. Something you need to know." Tara's heart pounded in her chest. "What is it?" Ethan glanced out the window, as if checking for eavesdroppers, before speaking in a low voice. "The corporation funding the research at this energy project isn't what they say it is. It's not about finding clean energy. They're planning to use Pandora's resources for their own gain, and they don't care about the consequences." Tara felt a wave of nausea wash over her. She had suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed was like a punch to the gut. "What are they planning to do?" "They're going to activate the system soon. and once it's running, it'll drain the life from the Tree of Souls. It'll kill Pandora. Tara, her hands trembled as she processed the information. This was worse than she had imagined. If they activated that system, everything she had fought for would be lost. Everything her people held sacred would be destroyed. We have to stop them, Ethan said, his voice urgent. I can help you shut it down, but we need to act fast. There's not much time. Tara looked at him, her mind racing. Could she trust him? He had always been an ally, but this was different. This was life or death, for both her people and his. I'll help you, she said finally. But we need to be careful. Loken and his followers are already planning something. If they attack, it could lead to a full-scale war. Ethan nodded, his expression grim. We'll stop them, together. As they began to plan their next move, Tara couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking a dangerous line. One wrong step, and everything could fall apart. But she had no choice. If she didn't act, Pandora would be lost forever. The next morning, the air was thick with tension. Tara could feel it in her bones as she made her way through the jungle, her thoughts consumed by the plan she and Ethan had devised the night before. The sun was barely up, but she knew Loken and his followers were already preparing for their assault. Time was running out. As she approached the human research facility, she saw Ethan waiting for her near the entrance. His expression was grim, his eyes dark with worry. He gave her a brief nod as she joined him. You ready? He asked quietly. Tara took a deep breath, nodding. As ready as I'll ever be. They slipped into the facility unnoticed, making their way to the lower levels where the experimental energy system was housed. The hum of machines and the sterile smell of the lab were familiar, but today they felt oppressive, like the weight of the world was pressing down on her shoulders. Ethan led the way, using his security clearance to bypass locked doors and restricted areas. Tara followed closely behind, her heart pounding in her chest. They couldn't afford to make any mistakes. They reached the control room without incident, but as they stepped inside, they found Dr. Carter already there, staring at the console with a troubled expression. He turned as they entered, his face hardening when he saw Tara and Ethan. What are you doing here? He demanded, his voice cold. Tara stepped forward, her gaze steady. We're here to stop you. We know what the energy system is really for. Dr. Carter's eyes narrowed. You don't understand. This project is bigger than any one of us. It's about securing a future for humanity. At the expense of Pandora? Tara shot back. At the expense of my people? Dr. Carter sighed, shaking his head. You're being short-sighted. The energy we can harness here could save millions of lives. It could power entire cities, revolutionize technology, and destroy everything we hold sacred. Tara interrupted. You'll kill the Tree of Souls, drain the life from this planet, and for what? Human greed? Ethan stepped forward, his voice firm. We can find another way, Dr. Carter. We don't have to destroy Pandora to save humanity. For a moment, Dr. Carter seemed to hesitate, his eyes flicking between Tara and Ethan. But then his jaw tightened, and he shook his head. You're too late. The system is already operational. There's nothing you can do. Panic surged in Tara's chest, but she forced herself to stay calm. We can shut it down, she said, her voice steady. We have to. Dr. Carter stepped in front of the console, blocking their path. I can't let you do that. Without warning, Ethan lunged forward, grabbing Dr. Carter's arm and pulling him away from the console. The two men struggled briefly, but Ethan was younger and stronger, quickly overpowering the older scientist. Tara, now! Ethan shouted, holding Dr. Carter back as Tara rushed to the console. Her hands trembled as she began to work, navigating through the complex interface. She had spent enough time in the lab to understand how the system worked, but disabling it was another matter entirely. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she frantically entered commands, trying to shut down the energy transfer before it reached critical levels. Behind her, she heard the scuffle of feet and the sound of Dr. Carter's labored breathing as he struggled against Ethan's grip. Time was running out. Finally, with a sharp beep, the console flashed red, and the hum of the machines began to die down. Tara's heart pounded in her chest as she watched the energy levels drop, the system slowly winding down. But just as she was about to breathe a sigh of relief, an alarm blared through the facility. A warning flashed on the console: system failure. Emergency shutdown required. What's happening? Ethan asked, his voice tight with fear. Tara's hands flew over the controls, trying to make sense of the warning. The system is destabilizing, she said, her voice shaky. If we don't shut it down manually, it could cause an explosion. Dr. Carter let out a low laugh, his voice laced with bitterness. You don't know what you're doing. If you disable the system now, it'll take out half the facility, maybe more. Tara's heart sank. She had to make a choice: let the system run its course and risk the destruction of Pandora, or disable it and potentially cause a catastrophic explosion. Ethan glanced at her, his eyes filled with determination. Do it. We can't let them destroy the Tree of Souls. Tara nodded, her hands steady as she entered the final command. The system's hum grew louder for a moment, and then everything went silent. For a heartbeat, it felt like the world had stopped. And then the ground shook. The lights flickered, and the sound of machinery grinding to a halt filled the air. The walls trembled, dust and debris falling from the ceiling as the facility began to collapse in on itself. Run! Ethan shouted, pulling Tara toward the door. They sprinted through the collapsing corridors, the ground shaking beneath their feet. Tara's lungs burned as she ran, her heart pounding in her ears. She could hear the distant sound of explosions, the facility tearing itself apart as the energy system imploded. They burst out of the facility just as the final explosion rocked the ground, sending a plume of smoke and fire into the air. Tara stumbled, her legs shaking, but Ethan caught her, steadying her as they watched the facility burn. For a moment, there was only the sound of the fire crackling and the distant hum of the jungle. And then, slowly, the sounds of Pandora began to return, of the soft rustle of leaves, the distant calls of creatures, the gentle whisper of the wind. Tara's heart ached as she looked out at the burning wreckage of the facility. They had stopped the system, but at what cost? We did it, Ethan said quietly, his voice filled with disbelief. We actually did it. Tara nodded, but the victory felt hollow. The rebellion wasn't over. Loken and his followers would see this as a sign that war was inevitable, that the only way to protect Pandora was through violence. But as she stood there, watching the flames die down, she knew there had to be another way. She couldn't let her people be consumed by hatred and fear, just as she couldn't let the humans destroy their home. The path ahead was uncertain, but Tara was determined to find a way to bridge the gap between their worlds. The future of both the Na'vi and the humans depended on it. Several days passed before the dust finally settled. The rebellion had shaken both the Na'vi and the humans, but for now, a fragile peace had taken hold. The surviving humans had evacuated the planet, leaving behind only those like Ethan who had chosen to stay and help rebuild. Loken's forces had scattered after the destruction of the facility, but the threat of further violence still loomed over Pandora. Tara had managed to broker a temporary truce, convincing both sides to stand down for now. As she stood at the base of the Tree of Souls, the soft glow of its tendrils illuminating the night, she felt a flicker of hope. The balance of Pandora had been restored, at least for the time being. But she knew that true peace would take time and trust. Ethan joined her, his expression calm as he gazed up at the tree. It's beautiful, he said quietly. Tara nodded. It is. It's everything to us. Ethan was silent for a moment before he spoke again. Do you think we'll ever really understand each other, humans and Na'vi? Tara looked up at the tree, the light reflecting in her eyes. I don't know, but I have to believe we can. Ethan smiled softly. I believe it too. They stood together in the quiet of the night, the weight of their choices heavy on their shoulders. The future was uncertain, but for now, there was peace. And that was enough.